Welcome back to the channel. This is a channel dedicated not only to my 2012 Jeep Rubicon, but to Jeeps in general, and to those whose passion for their Jeeps is just off the charts. Today we're headed to the good, the bad, and the ugly. GBU for short. Well, this is what the mountain climbers call it anyways. To us in the off-roading community, it's known simply as Ghost Falls. The falls are located around 30 minutes outside of Cochrane, Alberta. And it's one of the more popular off-roading destinations in the southern Alberta region. It's open year-round, and you can do either day trips or even some overnight camping if that's what floats your boat. For us, we're just doing a day trip to the falls. The falls, however, are really only frequented in the winter months. I'm actually told that in the summer, it's nothing more than a damp wall of rock. In the winter though, as you're about to see, it's absolutely spectacular. So it's time for this adventure to start. Our adventure starts just before 11 a.m. at the staging area of the Trans-Alta Road. This is where most of us air down our tires to around 20 psi. Given the above freezing temperatures, this was a must-do procedure. We would need all the extra traction we could get. This trail can be either super easy or super difficult. Today, because of the warmer temperatures, it would be the latter. It was definitely going to be a challenge for each and every one of us, especially Dodge Ram guy. Dude, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this trail would be that challenging. The falls have always been on my bucket list, but for me, as well as most of the people in this group, it would be our first trip there.
I've never went down to the falls, but down into the valley I've done lots of times, and it's a good time every time.
For our group, I'm sure it would indeed be a good time.
Almost.
For this guy, who just happened to get stuck in the staging area, not so much.
First recovery of the day.
For you armchair mechanics, I completely understand and agree that when you're doing recoveries, you do so driving forwards, not using reverse. But the thing about the staging area is there was no grip. I wasn't even using the power to pull the truck out of whatever he was stuck in. I was using Ruby's 4,200 pounds of girth. In fact, the clutch was partially depressed. So my drive shafts, hubs, as well as my pinions were completely safe the whole time, so don't even bother commenting. For the first half hour of our adventure, we were treated to picturesque Rocky Mountain vistas, but very little in the way of challenges on the trails. Our group was a mix of Jeeps, JKs, JLs, XJs, WJs, and one Ram 1500, with running boards, and all-season tires. After our short pit stop to take in some photos, we were underway once again, but not for long. Barely an hour into our adventure, and it was time to do several recoveries. But when you're on a trip like this with a group of this size, recoveries are just part of it.
It's amazing. It's perfect weather today. Obviously there's a couple people that are stuck, but that's the best part of Jeeping is everybody helps out everybody else.
Half hour later, we were back on our way. The trail would change from hardpack to powdery, slippery, slushy snowdrifts on a whim. More difficult sections of trail lay in wait for our unsuspecting caravan. Given the range and capabilities of the vehicles in our group, we decided to scope this next difficult section out to see if there was an easier way around it. It was, after all, approaching noon now, and we really didn't want to spend too much more time on recoveries, especially this early on in our run to the falls.
I find going with a larger group is way better because when, say, I get stuck and the guy trying to pull me out gets stuck, now we have even more people to try and help us get out. So I definitely agree, larger group for sure.
The drifted snow here looked just a little bit problematic for about half of our group, so we opted to take a trail through the cut line on the right instead. This, no doubt, saved us several recoveries, and most importantly, it saved us time, as we still had a long way to go. We made our final descent into this amazing river valley, and for all intents and purposes, this is the halfway point. Once the whole group was at the bottom of this hill, we continued on the trail towards the first water crossing. Well, most of us stayed on the trail. Not every vehicle in our group was a heavily modified Wrangler. The two WJs that joined us were absolute badasses on the trail. We also had a couple bone stock JLs.
I wouldn't do it without having a lift and tires and definitely recovery equipment, or else you're going to be stuck there for a while.
Yeah, somebody should hang back for the ram to see if he makes it. Like I mentioned before, the warm temperatures made the snow really weird. The top layer was thick and slushy, but the base layer was more like flour. My aired down trapdoors were amazing. Unlike an all-season tire, they didn't clog up and had really good grip in these less than ideal conditions. But tires weren't the only obstacles some in our group were facing. Mechanical issues were starting to rear their ugly head, and some others in our group were really concerned about losing light and having to do the return trip in the dark. But with our destination in sight, I was determined to continue on. Given that I was the organizer of this group and I guess the de facto leader, I really didn't want the group to split apart. But at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable, and quite frankly, some people were just really uncomfortable with how difficult the trail was and the fact that it was already 1:30 p.m. If there is such a thing as recovery fatigue, our group was suffering from it. So I totally get that a lot of people were just kind of done at this point. But the thing is, I came to make it to the falls, and that was my goal. 7 rigs turned back, but 5 of us continued onward to the falls. And before long, we reached the first river crossing.
Pieces of someone's vehicle lying there.
I know, right? So the first crossing was actually frozen. You would think this would make it easier, but it actually made it super sketchy, because we just didn't really know how thick the ice was. My friend Markus, who was also my spotter, couldn't really see the trail left by the previous group, and quite frankly, neither could I. And I was getting kind of impatient, and I really wanted to get to those falls, so I just went for it. And yeah, the bank collapsed and Ruby's front end sunk in, and I needed a recovery. But that was my only recovery all day long. That was my own fault. The next crossing we would do would be through water instead of on top of ice.
Oh, the drive-in was beautiful. I was honestly surprised by the capability of the Jeep. first, and second, I was surprised by my capability as well. But every single step of the way, there was a lot of guidance from everyone, so it helped. Follow the line, stay on path, and you'll reach the end.
Thanks to a Unimog, the final crossing would be impassable on the return trip. But with our destination in sight, going home was the last thing on our minds.
Okay, so we made it to the Ghost Falls. Unfortunately, not everybody from our group wanted to go all out because they're worried about some of the conditions going back, but we're either brave or stupid. But we made it.
The sight of the falls made all the work getting here totally worth it.
It's a nice trail. We've been out here a couple of times before. Frankly, I always forget where the heck the turn is, so it's good to actually see it again. And yeah, the trail's good, but we get that nice deep snow, and it gets a little slippery if you've not got enough momentum.
How many did I do? 5, 6, 7? I did not pull 7 people out today. 7 people, I guess. Holy, okay, 7 people, yeah.
Our adventure started at 11 a.m. With it being just after 3 p.m., we took a much needed break. Ruby performed absolutely amazingly, as did Steve's modified JL.
We have a 2-inch bow pile lift, a bunch of Terraflex components up front, 35-inch BFG KO2s.
But CT did just fine in his bone stock Willys. The question is, how long will it stay bone stock?
I'm gonna lift it for sure. I'm gonna get the new bumpers, the chopped off ones. First mod though is removing the mud flaps that came from the dealer. That's for sure.
So would you do it again?
Oh, I do it every day. Oh yeah.
Is it awesome?
This is exactly what I wanted to do with this car, and I've done it.
Thanks to the previously mentioned Unimog, the trip back started out just a bit rough. We would have to find a different crossing as the bank had collapsed. But with so many people on the TransAlta Trail, there's always an alternate route. We all had a profound sense of accomplishment. Our little ragtag group of Jeeps had accomplished exactly what we set out to do: make it to the falls. We arrived back at the staging area just after 5 p.m. with one final task left to do: air our tires back up for the drive home. The climbers really do have the name right. Our trip was pretty good. Definitely had some stuff that was bad, and yep, it got a bit ugly at times. Still, when I first discovered this trail, the falls were merely on my bucket list. But now, after having been on this amazing adventure, this is a trip that I can see myself doing over and over again.